Hi, my dear friends. We're here again to study this amazing book, Paul and Stephen, one more night. We are in the night number 15 already. Thank the Lord. I'm very happy to be here with my two great friends, Daniel and Nora. We're very happy to be in the second part of this book, this very interesting, beautiful, and emotional book. We have loads of interesting things to talk about tonight, loads of interesting information to bring about this book, loads of interesting parts. But before we start properly talking about the book, our great friend Nora will bring us some prayer so we can get more relaxed, get calmer, and focus on this amazing work of art.
Oh, it's beautiful. Nice to be here. All right, let us close our eyes if it feels in our alignment. If not, just tuning in with our eyes open, just feeling this beautiful sensation in our hearts, opening up to this beautiful planet, to this beautiful energy, to this love that is pouring into us. Dear Mother, Father, God, we ask for your blessings this evening, that you help us, that we are inspired to read, to share, to learn, to grow. And we thank you. We ask for everyone who is watching that is also blessed immensely. People have their waters, that the waters by our sides also be blessed with beautiful, healing, magnetic energy. With that, we'll say the Hail Mary prayer. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is thy fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. With that, we kindly ask permission to begin. So it is. All right, dear friends.
Thank you, dear, so much. So guys, first we will recap where we stopped last week. We saw that in spite of the chagrin that Sadok's attitude had caused on Sal, he went to visit his friend. However, he was not at home. A servant told Sal that he had gone to the synagogue with some of his guests. Sal went there. The day's work had begun. The reading from the text of Moses had finished. One of the Levites from Sidium was making relevant comments on the reading. The former rabbi's entrance caused general curiosity. As we've seen, Saul of Tarsus was a very important man in that Jewish context. The majority of those present were aware of his personal importance as well as his fervent, sure speech. However, when Zadok saw him, he went pale, and even paler when Saul asked him for a word in private. Although constrained, he agreed. They greeted each other without disguising the new feeling they now had toward each other. In light of the new evangelist's first amicable remarks, Sadok explained, displaying his offended pride. Sadok said, "In fact, I did know you were in the city, and I even came to see you at Judas Inn. However, what the innkeeper told me was such that I refrained from going to your room. I went so far as to ask him to keep my visit a secret. It truly seemed it truly seems incredible that even you have passively surrendered to the sorceries of the way. I cannot understand such a transmutation in your stalwart mind." "But Sadok," replied Sal calmly, "I saw Jesus resurrected." The other made a great effort to contain an outburst of laughter. "Your sentimental character used to be so much against mysticism. It is possible that it has surrendered to such grounds. Do you actually believe in such visions? Mightn't you believe yourself to be a victim of some shameless follower of the carpenter? Your current attitude will cause us profound shame." Saul looked at his friend, displaying immense concern in his anxious eyes. These accusations were the forecast of the welcome awaiting him amongst his old brother in arms and religious thought. "No," he said, feeling each word deeply. I cannot accept your arguments. I repeat, I saw Jesus of Nazareth, and I must proclaim that in him I acknowledge the Messiah promised by our most eminent prophets. While Sadoc made a broad gesture of astonishment upon observing that inflection of certainty and sincerity, Sal continued with conviction. What is more, I believe that at all times we can and ought to amend our errors of the past. And it is with this burning faith that I intend to reconstruct my own pathway. From now on, I shall work because of my certainty in Christ Jesus. I must not get lost in sentimentalist arguments, forgetting the truth, and thus I will proceed on behalf of my own friends. The lovers of the reality of life have always been detested most while they were yet alive. What to do? Up until now, my preaching has derived from the texts received from our venerable forefathers, but today my assertions are based not only on the repositories of tradition, but also on the proof of witnesses. Sadak could not hide how shocked he was. But your position and your family and your name and everything you had received with fervent commitment from those around you, and Sadak taking with taking him back to the past. Now I am with Christ and will all belong to him. His divine word has called me to more ardent and active endeavors. To those who will understand me, I, of course, owe the most sacred gratitude. However, toward those who cannot comprehend me, I will keep a most sincere attitude, remembering that the Messiah himself was led to the cross. Saul of Tarsus was really decided. How have you been infected with the obsession of martyrdom also? Sadak asked. Sal maintained a comely expression of personal dignity and concluded, I cannot indulge in futile opinions. I will wait for your friend from Cyprus to finish his speech and then relate my experience to all. Sadak got very shocked again. Are you talking about doing it here? And Sal answered, why not? It would be more reasonable if you would rest from your journey and illness in order to think more clearly on the matter, because I hope you will reconsider what happened, said Sadak. Sal, Sal answered, you know I'm not a child, and it is my duty to explain the truth in any circumstance. Sadak said, and if they jeer you, and if you are considered a traitor, in our eyes, loyalty to God should be greater than all this. It is possible that they will refuse to let you speak. Sadak was trying to convince him. And then Saud answered, this is very nice. My status is such that nobody will dare deny me what is my right. Then so be it. You will answer for your consequences, concludes Sadak, constrained. Serene and resolute. This is Emmanuel narrating the book for us. Serene and resolute, he avoided approaching the place where the distinguished visitors were stated and aimed for the large platform where a new podium had been set up. When the Levite from Sidium finished his exposition, Saul stood before all of them and they greeted him with looks of expectation. He politely greeted the directors of the meeting and asked permission to expound his ideas. Sadak did not have the heart to create a hostile atmosphere, leaving it all to run its course. That was why the priest shook Saul's hand with the usual warmth, welcoming his proposal with immense joy. The former rabbi lifted his brow nobly, just as he used to do in his days of triumph. Men of Israel, this is Saul beginning his speech. He began in this very interesting, solemn tone. In the name of the Almighty, I have come today to proclaim to you for the first time the truths of a new revelation. Until now, we have ignored the culminating event in the life of humankind. The promised Messiah has come in accordance with what the prophets who were glorified in virtue and suffering affirmed. Jesus of Nazareth is the Savior of sinners. If a bomb had exploded in the room, it would not have had a greater impact. Everyone looked at Sal aghast. The assembly was stunned. Sal, however, continued courageously after a pause. Do not be startled at what I'm saying. You know my conscience because of my upright life and my loyalty to the divine laws. Well, then, it is with this legacy from my past that I am speaking to you today, repairing the unintentional wrongs I committed in the sincere pursuit of a cruel and unjust persecution. I was the first to condemn the disciples of the way in Jerusalem. I brought about the unity of Romans and Jews for the unmitigated repression of all activities relating to the Nazarene. I violated sacred homes. I imprisoned women and children. I had some put to death. I was responsible for a huge exodus of workers who used to work peaceably in the city for its progress. I created for the most sincere spirits a reign of darkness and terror. I did it all in the mistaken belief that I was defending God, as if the Supreme Father needed miserable defenders. But on my journey to this city, I authorized by the Sanhedrin and the provincial court to invade homes and persecute innocent and inoffensible people. Jesus appeared to me right at your gates and asked me at full midday in the desolate and desert landscape, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? At this recollection, Saul's eloquent voice became softer and the tears ran. It's really emotional. Even we get really emotional at this part. He had interrupted his account upon remembering the decisive event of his destiny. The listeners looked at him with astonishment. What is this? Asked some. The doctor of Tarsus is playing a joke, said others, smiling, convinced that the young lawyer was looking for greater oratorical effect. Sal said, No, friends. I have never joked with you while on the sacred restroom. The just God did not allow my criminal violence to play out its course to the detriment of the truth. And he mercifully consented that this miserable servant would not meet death before bringing to you the enlightenment of the new belief. Men of my old faith, thundered Saul's voice, more incisive. It is no use trying to hide the truth. We are facing a new era in the light of which all our religious caprices are meaningless. A rain of insults suddenly cut his words short. Coward, blasphemer, dog of the way, away with its traitor of Moses. The derision came from all sides. Those most sympathetic toward the former rabbi, toward Saul, came into conflict with the harshest and strictest Pharisees. Some walking sticks were violently thrown at the podium. The two groups got into a scuffle, causing an uproar in the synagogue, and Saul perceived that he was on the verge of an irreparable disaster. That was when one of the oldest Levites approached the large platform, raising his voice with all the muster he was capable of and asking the assembly to accompany him in reciting one of the Psalms of David. The invitation was accepted by all. The more riled ones repeated the prayer, taken with shame. Saul followed the scene with profound interest. Now I will pass the word to our great friend Daniel here. Guys, Daniel's trying to fix his microphone. It will take just a couple of seconds, okay? He's changing it, switching it.
Well, as we're waiting, there's a part that that you read about where Saul is already at this point. You know my conscience because of my upright life and my loyalty to the divine laws. And then he shares about all the things that he violated. It says, I violated sacred homes, imprisoned women, children, put to death. And, he gave all this list of things. And I think it's so interesting about our conscious, right? How as he's growing, us too, as our alignment is growing, we start to perceive now. Like it's almost, I was talking to, I think it was friend Vanessa, and we're talking about how when we experience the goodness, right? When we are in this light, we can totally see the difference and perceive all of that. And I think that's what Saul is seeing himself. And he's like, I don't want to be there anymore. And so, anyhow, yeah. So I don't.
Totally, totally. I do agree. I thought this part was very significant because we see that he was recognizing that he, although he was very honest, because as he said and as he put here, he was defending the law of Moses and he thought he was doing every single thing because he was defending God, but he could realize that he did an enormous amount of mistakes. Daniel is here again.
Yeah.
Hi,
So
bro. Your mic's closed. But I thought I could hear you. I don't know if you can hear me, but I think that I will read your part. I think that will be best. Okay. No, don't worry. He's here with us.
okay.
I'll read. Sorry, guys. So we went through this harsh internet problem, but I will read Daniel's part in the book. This book is really pretty, so we don't lose when we read it, and it's actually a very rich opportunity. Okay, I will read his part.
Very
So we're
neat. Right now, I know, I'm sorry, it's almost going to be, it's Cardiac Radio's anniversary coming up.
yes,
And the
yes,
theme for this
yes,
year is healing. And I think
healing.
that's what we're learning. We're healing.
Yes,
It's okay to make mistakes, to be in this. But
yes,
okay.
totally. Yes, this is very significant. And when our spirit is in the right direction, when we have good faith, when we are well intentioned, we are heading towards healing, towards our cure. I will keep the book reading. Okay. So when the prayer had finished, the priest said with irritable emphasis, we regret this episode, but let us avoid turmoil, which will get us nowhere. Until yesterday, Saul of Tarsus honored our ranks as a paradigm of triumph. Today, his words are for us a twig of thorns. Despite a respectable past, his attitude now deserves condemnation. Perjury, dementia, we do not know for certain. If anybody else were on the platform, we would not hesitate to stone him here and now. But with a former colleague, different measures are in order. If he's ill, he deserves only compassion. If a traitor, only complete scorn. Let Jerusalem judge him as its ambassador. And for us, as for us, let us finish the synagogue speeches and retire in peace as faithful followers of the law. The ex rabbi endured the rebuke with great serenity in his eyes. Inwardly, his self esteem was crushed. The vestiges of the old man were demanding revenge and immediate reparation right then and there in front of everybody. He wanted to speak again, to demand to be heard, to force his colleagues to listen to him, but he felt restrained by irrepressible emotions that weakened his explosive impetuosity. Motionless, he watched as his old friends from Damascus left the room calmly, without even a gesture of greeting. He also noticed that the Levites from Siddim seemed to understand him by their looks of sympathy, whereas Zadok looked at him with sarcasm and a smile of triumph. Repudiation had come knocking at his door. Accustomed to applause wherever he appeared, he had been the victim of his own illusions, for thinking that to speak successfully about Jesus, the ephemeral laws he had already won in the world would be enough. He had been badly mistaken. His colleagues had discarded him as useless. Nothing hurt him more than not being effective when priestly devotion was burning in his soul. He would have preferred for them to have slapped his face, imprisoned him, flogged him, but not to have taken away the opportunity to argue with Father's, winning and convincing all of them with the logic of his explanations. That abandonment wounded him deeply because, more than any other consideration, he knew he was not working on his own behalf out of vanity or selfishness, but for his co religionists tied to their strict and inflexible conceptions of the law. Little by little, the synagogue became deserted under the burning heat of the early hours of the afternoon. Saul sat on a rustic bench and wept. The struggle between the vanity of the past and the self renunciation had begun. To comfort his oppressed soul, he remembered Ananias' account of when Jesus had told the old disciple that he would show him how important it was to suffer for the love of his name. He left the synagogue in sorrow to look for his benefactor in order to be comforted by his words. Ananias was not surprised to hear what had happened. I can see myself surrounded by enormous difficulties, said Saul, somewhat perturbed. I feel that I must spread the new doctrine to uplift our fellow beings. Jesus has filled my heart with unexpected strength, but human brutality is enough to frighten the strongest. Yes, explained the old man patiently. The master has given you the job of a sower. You are full of goodwill, but what does a man do upon receiving such responsibilities? Before anything else, try to gather the seeds into your private coffers so that your efforts may be productive. The Nafit understood the scope of this comparison and asked, "But what do you mean by that?" I mean that a man living a pure and uplift life without the errors of his own good intentions is always ready to plan goodness and justice along the route he takes. What Nora and I had just said. But the one,
Sorry.
yes,
Yeah, and
no,
that word neophyte, it's so beautiful. I mean, because that's why he's so new. He just wanted to
yes,
like spread it out. And I love that this conversation is happening. Uh-oh.
yes. This is really beautiful because we see that Saul, with all though that fervent strong that he was defending the law of Moses, he wanted to do that to Jesus. But this perspective, this way that he used to walk with all the things that he believed, that was not what Jesus was calling him for. Jesus was calling him to be a humble man, to be a new man. And we see that although he was very honest when it came to defending the law of Moses, there was much vanity and pride involved. That's the truth. I will carry on here. But the one who has already made mistakes or who is harboring some guilt needs to bear witness to his own suffering before he can teach others. Those who are not entirely pure or who have not suffered along the way will never be understood by those who simply listen to their words. Their lives contradict their teachings. Besides, everything that is of God demands great peace and deep understanding. In your case, you must think of Jesus' lesson as he dwelt for 30 years among us, preparing himself to endure our presence for only 3, to receive a task from heaven. David lived with nature herding his flocks to prepare the way for the Savior. John the Baptist meditated for a long time in the harsh deserts of Judea, and in his sensible thoughts fell on Saul's heavy soul like a vitalizing balm. When you have suffered more, continued his benefactor and true friend, you will have improved your understanding of people and things. Only pain teaches us to be human. When people enter the most dangerous period of their lives, after early childhood and before the night of old age, when their lives are abounding with energy, God sends them children so that in raising them, their hearts will become compassionate. From what you have told me, it is possible you are not to become a father, but you will have children of Calvary, far and wide. Didn't you see Simon Peter in Jerusalem surrounded by unfortunate beings? Of course, you will find a larger home on earth where you will be called to practice fraternity, love, forgiveness. It is necessary to die to the world so that Christ may live in us. This is so beautiful. Those sound and meek remarks pierced the spirit of the former rabbi like a balm of consolation from much broader horizons. His loving words made him remember someone who used to love him very much. Saul's mind was tired from the clashes that day, and he made a great effort to focus his thoughts. Ah, now he remembered perfectly that someone was Gamaliel. Suddenly, he felt the desire to see his old master. He understood the reason for that recollection. The last time they had met, Gamaliel too had talked to him about the need he felt for solitary places to ponder these sublime new truths. He knew Gamaliel was in Palmyra with a brother. Why hadn't he remembered his former teacher before, who had been almost like a father to him? Gamaliel would surely receive him with open arms, would rejoice at his recent attainments, and would give him generous counsels as to which road to follow. Immersed in loving memories, Saul thanked Ananias with a meaningful look, adding sensibly, "You're right. I will go into the desert instead of returning to Jerusalem in a hurry, perhaps without enough strength to face the incomprehension of my colleagues. I have an old friend in Palmyra who will welcome me with open arms. I shall rest there for some time until I can confine myself in the desert regions to meditate more on the lessons I have received." And Aeneas approved his idea with a smile. They remained in conversation for a long time until night immersed all things in its veil of thick darkness. The old preacher then led the neophyte to a humble meeting being held on that Sabbath on the former rabbi's great delusionment. Damascus did not have an actual church per se. However, it did have a large number of believers united by the religious ideal of the way. The place of the prayer was at the home of a poor washwoman who rented out her sitting room to support her paralytic son. Saul was very surprised to see that the place was a miniature of the scene he had observed the first time when he had had the invincible curiosity to attend the famous preaching of Stephen in Jerusalem. Around the rustic table were miserable plebeians whom he had always kept at a distance from his social sphere. Illiterate women with children on their laps, rough old bricklayers, washerwomen who could not speak two words correctly, elderly people with trembling hands, supported by strong walking sticks, miserable sick people who displayed the symptoms of dolorous disease. The ceremony seemed even simpler than those of Simon Peter and his fellow Galileans, and Aeneas presided over the meeting. Sitting at the table like a patriarch in the bosom of his family, he prayed for Jesus' blessings for the goodwill of all. Next, he gave a reading from the teachings of Jesus, pointing out a few of the divine master's words contained in the loose parchments. After commenting on the page he had read, illustrating it with significant facts known to him or taken from his own personal experience, the old disciple of the gospel left his seat, went to the rows of benches, and laid his hand on the sick and the needy. Normally, according to the custom of the early Christian groups of the first century, upon remembering the joy of Jesus when he served the meal to his disciples, there was a small distribution of bread and pure water in the name of the Lord. Oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. Saul was highly moved as he ate a piece of the simple cake. To his soul, this small bit had the divine flavor of universal fraternity. The clear, fresh water from the rustic jug seemed like a fluid of love coming from Jesus and spreading to all beings. At the end of the meeting, Ananias prayed fervently after telling them about Saul's vision and his own. During the simple comments of that evening, he asked the Savior to protect the new servant on his trip to Palmyra so that he could ponder more profoundly the immensity of his mercy. Listening to his prayer, which the warmth of their friendship clothed with particular tenderness, Saul wept in appreciation and gratitude, comparing the emotions of the rabbi he had been with the servant of Jesus he now wanted to be. During the opulent meetings of the Sanhedrin, he had never heard of colleague intrigue happen with greater sincerity. Among the most enthusiastic, he had only found empty praises, ready to switch the vile slender when he could not transform them into material favors. Everywhere, superficial admiration, the offspring of the game of worldly interests. Here, the situation was very different. None of these creatures deprived of fortune had come to ask for favors. They all seemed happy to serve God, who had brought them together for a period of exhaustive and painful work. And at the end, they asked Jesus to grant them peace of mind for their undertaking. When the meeting ended, Saul of Tarsus had tears in his eyes. In the Ways Church in Jerusalem, the Galilean apostles had treated him with special deference owing to his political social position and as holder of the prerogatives that worldly conventions conferred to him. But the Christians of Damascus impressed him more deeply. They conquered his soul, enrapturing it with imperishable affection, though through their gesture of true love, treating him as a brother. Now it's with our great friend Norah here.
Absolutely beautiful. Just to see the little minute details of how Saul, again, looking through his eyes, he's seeing things differently. Things that perhaps when he was in this other more materialistic um, matter, he might have seen bypass, didn't even notice. But now it's the little things like the part of the cake, maybe because I'm hungry and I like to eat. I was like, wow, that's a beautiful way to see it, right? Obviously, it's talking more of that nourishment, right? And we're going to continue with that because this other part that we're going to end, there's two beautiful things that Saul is teaching us, which is one, the friendships that we have in these relationships, these new relationships that he's building with this new spiritual community, with this Christian community. And then the second thing, again, is that simplicity that he's starting to kind of let go of all of that other stuff, right? And we're already seeing that. So it says here, one by one, they shook his hand, right? Wishing him a happy journey. A few humble old men kissed his hands. Such displays of affection gave him new strength. So there was something about that, it wasn't no longer about having the best feasts and the best the jewelry or anything. It was those little gestures that fed him and made him feel different inside. For the first time in his life, he showed an interest in the smiles of children. Isn't that beautiful? And it's like, oh my gosh, even those little things, when we are in Jesus' light, when we're in this vibration, we start to see it as a way of being grateful, of being in gratitude. He had the impression that friendship in the genuine Christian communities was different from everything that he had been shown to him in mundane gatherings. In the diversity of social struggles, the dominant trait of relationships in his eyes were now summed up in the advantages of one's personal interests, whereas in the unity of efforts in carrying out the Master's works, there was a divine stamp of trust, as if the commandments had original divine ascendance. So they all talked as if born under the same roof. If they proposed an idea worthy of more pondering, they did it with serenity and general understanding of their duty. If they talked about light and simple subjects, the conversation showed open and comforting joy. None of them displayed any concern with being less than sincere in defending their own point of views. Instead, they showed honesty without any trace of hypocrisy, because, as a rule, they felt they were under the tutelage of Christ, who, to the conscience of each one, was the invisible and present friend whom nobody could deceive. I'm gonna take a little pause because we can now move forward. The times today we're talking about healing, right? And I don't know Brazil, but here in the States, it's like this post-pandemic syndrome where everybody kind of has to like everybody's just going out, okay, which is healthy, which is good. And I think we learned a lot about friendships, right? When we were away physically, we had to build relationships, and some of us built different ones. And now coming back to different kinds, we're kind of seeing this from a different perspective. But I have to say that while the pandemic and we were in lockdown, there was a community here in Spiritism, Cardiac Radio, other Spiritist centers here, Brazil, everywhere. I mean, all the spiritual community came together. And I say that it's so special. I'm not comparing, I'm making an observation. Returning back to my friends, we all have different beliefs, we're all in different, but there is something special. I have to say that what Sao is experiencing here, if we really perceive, there is something very unique because we pray, we study, we try to work things is, and that's the key. It's not just we read and we study and we know it, but I think there was also a part we had to practice it. There was a part where you read, Jerome, where it says you have to practice fraternity, love, and charity. And that's the pivotal part. So in our relationships, we have to be in that alignment. And when we start putting ourselves in that perspective, we start to see different things. I know there's a lot here of this political talk, and a lot of things have been happening in the United States lately, right? I love how he even talks about how friendships in this circle where he was in, there is, it's about comforting joy. If they had like different opinions, different ways, they always remembered one thing, right? He said this, the special thing about these friendships, they were under Christ. And so every time, right, every time we want to fall into that, oh my gosh, we all have different views, we all have different experiences. Always remember, I always see that book, Jesus in the Home, right? When Jesus was his disciples. Imagine us in a table with Jesus. What comes out of us? Would it be What would it be okay to say it, right? So, anyways, that's beautiful. All right. So he continues. So, if we want to find out more about how to be a friend, highly advised to read this part of the book. Then he says, okay, so he's having this beautiful epiphany of new friends, a new sense. And now he's on to his second endeavor, which might have been a little bit harder for him because he's realizing when he had money, everybody was around. When he had what he, right? So now he's seeing the simpleness of a relationship, but now he's going to be put to the test. Instead, he's going to go by foot. So it says here, he was going to go to, what's the name of that city? I can't, Palmyra.
Palmyra, yes.
Thanks, dear. Okay, so he's gonna go to Palmyra by foot. It says Saul made sure of living on foot as to begin his new life with the austerity that would be of utmost use to him later. He would no longer travel as a doctor of the law, surrounded by servants, but as a disciple of Jesus, committed to his plan. And so the chapter ends. Despite all of this, he was convinced that his soul had been transported to new horizons because through everything in nature, he seemed to receive the thought of Christ speaking lovingly to his heart. So let me close my. Okay. So I don't think this is talking about we leave our cars and we never get on them, although we could say less emissions, right? We could. This is not a talk on global warming, but of course he's not letting go of those things. We have to understand that in Saul's life, these were the things where we're feeding his ego. He was not sharing his things. He was, right. So for him, walking by foot, and for us to learn, it was him learning how to be more humble, learning to let go of all those things. So now we're in chapter 2 of this part 2 entitled The Weaver. So we have a couple of pages, and it's now he's actually walking into the city, right? And as he's walking to the city, well, he knows he's gonna have to stay somewhere. Okay, and it says here he settling in an ordinary inn to freshen up from the fatigue of the journey. He looked into his pouch to determine his course of action, right? Something he wasn't used to. Now it's like, oh my gosh, I cannot stay where I used to. Now I have to learn how to stay in a more humble place. So he was running out of money and would barely have enough to pay the dedicated companion who had been his loyal friend throughout the arduous journey. When he was informed of the amount he would need for the inn, he saw he would come up short. So he spoke humbly to his servant Judah. At the moment, I don't have enough to pay you in full for your services. However, I will give you half in cash plus the camel in payment for the rest. So the servant was humbled by Esau's proposal. It says, "You don't have to pay me so much, sir," he responded, confused. "The value of the camel alone is more than enough. That way you won't be left penniless. I'll be content with just a few coins to pay for my return." And then it ends this part where Saul looked at him gratefully, right? Stating that it would be impossible to retain him any longer. He said goodbye to his friend. Afterward, he retired to his simple room, and he was take and began to meditate in detail on the latest events in his life. He was alone, without family, without friends, without money, quote unquote. So we're going to go back to the part of the money, which, my gosh, I mean, we've all been there, right? I mean, well, some of us have had that experience. And I think it's beautiful that even though Saul was at the last, his intention for this trip was to spread the good news, right? To be a servant, and we always provided, right? In this case, it was the money, and it has happened. Maybe some people get uncomfortable talking about it, but when we are in this helping, when we're in this thing, we are being provided for. In the book Pills of Trust, and I know, I think our dear Carol Correa did a study. I've also participated. It's a bunch of little messages by Dr. Diaz de Cruz. And it is so enlightening to see. He says in one part, seconds before we think it's over, we're actually being rescued. And that's exactly a little example of how Saul was being helped in this sense. It was right. He had some faith, and his faith was just to be humble. He didn't do a prayer. He didn't have to go out of like, oh, use these fancy words. He was humble and he was honest and sincere and he was blessed. And that's so beautiful. So I know we've all been there. And I've been there where I didn't even have for food, right? And it was not easy. If any of you have been in these shoes, it's not easy. And you're right. Sometimes the people we think are friends are not even there. I bet that Saul was in shock. That's why he was. It says here, he went home meditating the detail of these events. A servant was okay with it. I was watching these videos. A lot of people are doing these social experiments. I don't know. I can't remember the channel, but I love it. And so there are these guys. They stand outside supermarkets, and they ask a person, I'm hungry. Can you like pass some water or anything from your cart? Can I have?" These guys say a lot of people say no, but there's a couple of people that say yes, and a lot of them, when you look to them, it's usually the ones that have less that give more. And I think that's exactly what's happening, right? This experience was beyond. So, and this last part where it says before going to bed, he was doing that little thought, well, how was my day? It's so beautiful to do that. It's so important. We cannot just go to bed like I'm guilty sometimes. I'm like on my phone and it's like, Nora, there's the mentor. What are you doing, ma'am? Put the phone, start thinking about the day, do a prayer, do something. Because remember, when we know as spiritists, right, through Kardec's work, through Andre Luis, when we go to bed, we end up in another place. So it's so important to do this nightly review. It was so important for him. And unquote, even though he thinks he's without family, friends, or money, in actuality, I think he's really the beginning of his abundance. He's very rich because all the experiences, right? I know we didn't get to talk too much on this, but on the part that you read, where he says here that he never would think he would be with the poor, with women who were illiterate, children with their laps, bricklayers, washerwomen, all these people that he would never even look, but yet now he's with them. He's very rich now in this sense of smiles and children. Oh my God, it was beautiful. Anyway, that's the part. Yeah.
Okay, dear, a very interesting thing that you just said about reviewing our day when we're in bed. This is actually a question in the Spirit's book. I don't know if you remembered it, but question 919, Saint Augustine brings exactly this to us. He tells us that we should every day before we go to bed, before we go to sleep, review our day and think, what did I do wrong and what could I do differently? And then, if we do this each day, and he tells us, as an elevated spirit that he is, that he used to do that when he was incarnated on earth. So, this that Nora has just brought us is a huge, huge advice that can take us to another level. Another very interesting thing here is that Nora brought Andrea Louis' perspective, and when we're and after we as humanity, we have been through loads of difficult years, especially those last 2 years. And now we're thinking a lot about the cure, about reaching the cure. And again, bringing Andrea Luis, and now I will not remember the instructor that told Andrea Luis that, but he brings us in a very interesting book that I will not. I don't know if the book is "The Messengers" or "Missionaries of the Light." Is one of these two. I think it's "Missionaries of the Light," and he tells us that one day when we are more evolved, we will understand that compassion, fraternity, and love, all those things, they are as important to our health as food, water, and remedy. One day we will achieve this point of understanding, and that's the truth. We as spiritists, we know that our spirit can heal our physical bodies. It can. And at the same time, and as proportional, the same way our spirit can destroy our physical bodies. When we get all those senses of revenge, of vanity, all those low vibration, all those low vibrational thoughts, we are hurting our physical bodies. And it's really interesting because we are seeing a very honest but full of pride and vanity man having to cross this way, and having to struggle to become a Christian, because it is really harsh to let go of our old habits. It's not easy, guys. We are seeing a man here that he really fights for what he believes, but he used to do that fighting in a very wrong way. And Jesus is calling him to a new fight, a very important fight, the most important fight of his life, but he has to fight in another way. Andrea Luis brings us another very important advice, that when we're fighting for the gospel, and when we're fighting, because this will happen when we're fighting against evil spirits that want us to fall, that wants to see us in those bad pathways, we can't use the same tools that those low vibrational spirits use. Because if we do that, Andrea Luis tells us that if we use the same tools that they use, we will fall as low as they are. So we need to see Paul of Tarsus. Yeah, we're still talking about Saul of Tarsus. We need to see this man, and see that even when we are very well intentioned, it is harsh to let go of that old self and to become a Christian and to walk towards Jesus. Dear, do you? I talk too much. Dear, do you? Do you want to say something?
It is beautiful, and you're right. It's not easy, but we know that they say the gate is narrow, right? The gate is narrow, so it's very very important to Kimi. I gotta block this here. There you go. It's very important for us to um, be persistent, to continue working, to keep doing the work, to not give up, even though it might seem like it. And here we have a story, a little snippet of someone who is going through a difficult time. He lost a lot of things for this path, right? And yet he is going to continue. We know there's right a little teaser here. He's gonna continue with this faith, right? But he's already getting that help. We're always protected. Prayer is our number one thing, even though we can read in between the lines here that this meditation that he's doing, this preaching, being around those friends in that community that he describes, he is doing that. And it's almost like we're building around ourselves like this beautiful structure of protection because we need it, because life is going to be very difficult right now. It is very hard. It all of us, even here, we have our struggles. I mean, sometimes I remember, the day of the program, it's da, 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 da. We had to pray, and we continue to pray, and we pray, and things will work out just like it did for Saul in this case. And what a beautiful reflection for us tonight, right? And we're entering into a different vibration with Saul little by little, and just holding on to this. And I mean, I'm like very touched tonight just because of everything that he's going through. And again, it's not that he's letting that everything's gonna be taken away from us. I mean, unless it's part of reincarnatory plan. It's more of the things that are part of our ego. Those are the ones that we need to let go. Things that are materialistic, like you said, João. And we read Andre, all the things that matter are parts inside. And there's a lot of studies already done. The importance of talking to ourselves now, the importance of our health, the way what we put inside our bodies, how we talk to one another, our thoughts, everything is congruent with everything. It's changing a lot. I mean, I know they did that water experiment with the language, starting with what's I think I always forget his name, Emoto something, and just do you remember his name?
Yes, I will not remember his name exactly right now, but I did that experience by myself. And the results, yes, yes, and the results were fantastic. I used three cups filled with rice and water, and I used different words in each cup. In one cup, I used to say loving words like "I love you." In other cup is I will take and to explain here to you guys the two cups. The cup that I used to say loving words and the cup that I used to say negative words. And guys, it's so impressive. It's so impressive. That experience, I think everybody should do that experience because it really changed me. When I did that, I saw in a very materialistic way that our thoughts and our words, they really have a huge power. The cup that received loving words, the rice went all the way really white. The water was still with a good smell, but the other guys, it was crazy. It got such a bad smell and a bad color. The rice got very black and in some parts brown. It was crazy. It's crazy. And of course, we do with the same amount of rice, with the same amount of water. We do a very organized work. It's really, really impressive. Everybody should do that because when we do that and we see what happens, we got a much higher belief in the power of our thoughts. And as Emmanuel always tells us, that our thoughts have power. They do, guys. It's not a joke. It's not a joke at all.
Absolutely. And the biochemistry of our bodies, it's water.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Perfect.
Imagine. Yeah.
Yes.
So
So
there it
we
is. So Saul is teaching us a lot about that. Yeah.
yes, we have a way, guys. We do have ways. Jesus has brought us this amazing way, and if we walk towards Him in that way that He left us, we will reach something that's better when it comes to evolving spiritually. I don't have anything else to say. I'm very satisfied here with tonight. I just want to honor our friend Daniel here.
No,
He really wanted to be here with us, but the internet problems, the headphone problems did not allow him. But bro, we love you and we know that you wanted to be here, and we will be together here in loads and loads of Saturdays, weeks, maybe other days. We are gonna be here. My dear friend, thank you so much. I'm learning a lot with you too. Really, I'm very, very glad and emotional with this study. Reading these words tonight, I got really emotional. This is really touching. I want to thank you so much. I want to thank everybody that's here with us till now. Here in Brazil, it's already past midnight.
oh my
Thank
God.
you guys. Yes, thank you guys so much. So much. I know
For,
that
for
a
keeping my
couple of yes, I know that a couple of great friends are keeping up with us in Japan. I've heard that yes, last week there's a group there that is with us that's accompanying the study. I know that a couple of friends here in Brazil that are studying the book with us. Thank you guys so much. For everybody that watches this live and everybody that watches in demand, thank you guys so much. We see each other and you guys next week, okay? Bye bye. Thank
Bye,
you so much.
guys. Much
Love
love.
you.
Bye.
Much love.